Record. Okay, so let me introduce our next speaker, Przemek Kotecki. Przemek is a business and technology transformation expert, including chief COVID officer when the pandemic struck, who plays board games a lot, sails to the end of the world, Antarctica the furthest so far, and loves dumplings. So, just a reminder, the Slido link is the same. You can submit your questions to Przemek. So, Przemek, I'm passing the microphone to you. Oliver, you're muted.
Przemek, I can't hear you. No?
Yeah, me either.
Przemek is not muted.
How are we doing now?
Yeah, very good.
All right, the magic of technology. Daria, if you could stop sharing, then I will be able to share. Hi, hello, everyone. Very glad to be here. Thanks for joining. So as mentioned, I will be sharing a few thoughts with you around crisis mode and the approach from the games that we could use for our real life. So these are some number of thoughts that I gathered over playing, be it board games, computer games, sports games, any other games that I hope are transferable to the real life experience, but obviously everyone will have their own approach. So quick check, can you see my presentation now?
Yep.
Yes, all right, perfect. So few things, just quick disclaimers. No time of playing board games most likely will prepare you for the real life scenarios if you're not training, preparing yourself and mentally getting ready. But then again, if you get some of the skills or concepts or mental clarity from those, it can help you with those, right? And then use common sense whenever you are within the crisis mode or in the crisis situation. And with that, Daria already introduced me a bit. My superpower is I speak Polish, so that probably counts. My presentation is in English though, and it's work in progress. By that I mean this is the first time I've adapted it to the crisis theme. So super eager to get your feedback at the end of the presentation of what it brought. Are there any other thoughts that you would implement into those, and so on. I do bring experience from few of the companies. Some of those are listed above. Most recently, I worked as the head of group transformation office at Allegro. Allegro is like a smaller Amazon, you can imagine. I've also worked with NetGuru, that's digital consultancy, and Thomson Reuters, that's a news corporation or information corporation. I'm also a member and volunteer at PMI, Poland chapter. When it comes to hobbies, I come with learning a lot of this water sports, especially recently I'm focusing on kite surfing. So I'm trying to learn how to do a back roll right now, if you're into that sport. That is not that easy for me, at least. I do love dumplings, as Daria mentioned, all those different types, especially with cottage cheese. And then I still am supporting, but I was very involved in the scouting previously. So I was a scout, I was scoutmaster, I was on the district level working with developing different concepts for the scouts. So this element of be prepared, being prepared, that scouts have as their motto, right, is very close to my heart. And that goes a long way with all the crisis situations as well. And I was thinking, what was the biggest crisis situation I personally took part in? I had this luck that I did not experience too severe situations in my life, The biggest one that I took part in was the train crash. So we had the train hitting number of people and there was a crash, and I was actually helping to save those people and give them first aid and so on. So that's one of my experiences when it comes to crisis situations, where you fairly quickly needed to adapt and act accordingly. So with that, you know a little bit about me. So let's see how we do the other way around, right? So I'm talking games, right? And the real life application of the games. I will be focusing on 3 types of games. So video games, be it computer, PlayStation, mobile games, sports games, team sports games like soccer, basketball, and so on, or board games, right? Board games being any type of board games or card games that you can imagine. And I do have a Menti ready for you. So if you could follow the QR code or go to menti.com and put the code in place, I will have few, roughly 5 or 6, I think, questions along the way, along the presentation, where you can enter some of your concepts there, and we'll see how it goes. So let me move here. All right. So it's still menti.com. Right, you can use code 2592840, right? And the question is, which types of games do you play? So when you think about last year, right, over the last 12 months, right, what's your take on the games? Did you play any video games, any board games, any team sport games, any mixes of those or none of those? And there are no right and wrongs, right? It's just to see how are we doing, what's where we are here all together. Okay, so board and video games arising. I'll give us 30 more seconds or so. You go to menti.com or you download the application Mentimeter, right? And you put this code in place. And then once you're there, we will always use the same during my presentation, right? So there will be other questions just going as the next question there. All right, so majority of the people that voted say board and video games. This is something that you've played so far. Quite a lot of board games in the percentage-wise part, and the mix of the others. So you can be adding those, right? This is just to balance us and see how we're doing, how many people do want to have the interactive part of the session as well here, right? And you can jump in on the other questions as well. Right. All right. So this is our setup. This is who we are. So I'll go through a little bit about the video games and board games, and I'll have one example from the sports team game as well here. Right. And how did it start for me for the video games? Just very quickly. Right. So I do have enough experience in playing board games that I remember Pac-Man on Commodore C64. That's what I was playing as one of the first games, and then it moved to Air Force. So the shooting, going with the plane and shooting all the other planes. And then I saw my cousin playing Civilization. That was Civilization 2. Now there are 6 of those in the series, right? So Civilization 2 as the strategy turn game where you turn by turn you plan something around that. That was also the time when the Heroes of Might and Magic were on the screens. So we played Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and then next numbers is 3, 4, 5. Okay. In school with my friends, there was not that much time to actually play strategic games, but you could play shooters. So that was Quake 2 at the time. Now it's probably Unreal or some other games. And then I moved a little bit to RTS, that's real-time strategy, like StarCraft or Warcraft or some other games. And currently, as you can imagine, I do not have that much time to play computer games, but I still do have this agreement with my wife that every couple of months I can take part of the weekend off for playing computer games, right? So what I usually do, I do play either Humankind or Stellaris. Those are grand strategy games where you think how you can, well, usually conquest wider population, but you can do it through diplomacy, you can do it through trade, you can do it in the spiritual way, or you can do it in the military way. So a number of other things. Those are grand strategy games. So this is how the video games started for me. And I was wondering, how did it work for you, right? So I do have 2 questions here for you. So what was the first video game of any type that you can recall playing? And if you did not play any video game at all, then maybe your kids do play, right? So any game that you think or can remember. All right, Sonic, the blue, fast guy, asteroids. Okay, so this is similar to Air Force, where I think you need to go between the asteroids and then shoot something. Mario Kart, Star Fox Adventures. I don't know that one, but I'm assuming similar to Sonic. FIFA. Okay, so soccer game, playing game. Super Mario, Decathlon, tanks, shooting tanks. I played that as well. Lemmings. Oh, I do remember those blue creatures going back and forth. I do see some strategy, Age of Empires, so building your empire and going through the ages. Dragon Order of the Flame. I'm guessing that's RPG game. FIFA Arcade stuff, Pool of Radiance, few other games here as well. Street Fighter. All right, so we do have a mix of the games here that you actually did play. We do see some others being added. And now those fit into a number of different scenarios. So some are very connected to adventure. Some are very active that you need to choose something or shoot or something. Some are strategy games or adventure games and so on. So different types. Oh, Total War. I do like those series as well. I do have and play from time to time Warhammer 3 on Total War right now. All right, so with that, the next question. So thinking about the types of games, right? When you think about the types of games, what types of games do you play, right? And you do have action games. So those are all those shooters, running, finding something, or maybe adventure games where you need to solve some puzzle to get somewhere, or those platform games as well, role playing, or maybe it's a simulation like Sims, you're building a city, or I don't know, building a farm, or maybe it's a strategy game where you need to build something around specific goals. Sports games, be it FIFA and all the others, or maybe puzzle games or any other. So what types of games, when it comes to video games, are you playing? Oh, and you can play a lot of different types of those, right? So here we do have, yeah, I think that with the people interested in project management, that usually goes with strategy games. That's the usual thing there. But there's, as you can see, there's a mix, right? And of course, there's no right and wrong here, right? But a lot of puzzle games, a lot of sports games, adventure games, so some. But almost everything has number of votes. There's one other, so that would be interesting. You can put in the chat what's the other type of games. So as you can see, there are a number of different types of games where we can play, have fun, or maybe practice something. So with that, let's go to the board games, and I'll go back to some examples of video games and board games in a second. But I wanted to say on the board game side as well, right? So some people play video games who played the whole life. I did play video games a lot, but I also had this luck that I played board games. It started for me with our father setting the chessboard. And as you can imagine, that did not always go according to the actual rules within the chess. But well, we were very active, right? We did play a lot with friends. We started some association for playing board games. Then we actually really often we play with our family or friends. With few different types of games, be it very fast, very quick party games to the long strategic games. The longest game that I have played so far took 12 hours to complete. So that's a grand strategy game. You start at 9 a.m. and you lock the doors. Nobody can go out until you finish, right? And then you order pizza in the meantime. That's actually quite interesting. The name of the game is Twilight Empire, if you're interested in this kind of games. So that's how it started for me. So again, how did it go for you? Let's see how did it go. So what was the first board game any type of the board game that you can recall, right? And board games, that can mean card games, board games, I don't know, some different other activities that you do socially without the use of the computer and so on, right? Chess, Monopoly, checkers, Guess Who, okay. Snakes and ladders, Jenga. Oh, I love Jenga. I always lost in that game, but I do like this. Mensch ärgere dich nicht. Ludo, that's Ludo in English. The men do not irritate yourself. If I translated it correctly. Card games, okay, Scrabble, Super Memo, Guess Who, Candyland, Mousetrap, okay. It's a number of very interactive, quick games here, snakes and ladders, checkers, chess, getting bigger. The bigger the result, the more people said it. All right, so this is the setup of some of the first games that we played. And now let's, oh, there's something more there. And then which type of board game, again, do you like the most? And I just go quickly through the types of the games in the meantime as you vote. So you do have abstract games. Abstract games are checkers, chess, Go, and so on. Those where you do put those pieces in place and you have some strategy there, right? You do have games called Euro games, where you do not have that much interaction between each other, but you can break some of the cycle of playing for each other depending what type of games it is. Example would be Ticket to Ride. You do have party games. Then you do have strategy games where you usually need to win with everyone else. You do have cooperation games where you play with others against the common enemy. And this common enemy is the board game itself, but sometimes those are the games with the traitor inside. That's one of you actually needs to act against your team, and you need to find out who that is. And you do have a lot of playable card games, be it Magic the Gathering, there was Pokemon at one time, a number of others, right? And probably a number of other types of games that we have there as well. So let's see how we do here. All right, so here we do have a lot of people that play abstract games, chess and checkers, we saw that. Strategy games, again, one of the biggest ones. And cooperative, right? So we like to cooperate and work together on those. Party games, card, and then card building a little bit less, and then there's one other there as well. All right, so with this setup, yeah, I see a few others changing here as well. Okay, we do see a mix of what whenever you do have experience with playing games, right? Those are some things that you're playing. So hopefully you'll be able to add on to my presentation and share your findings with what you learned from those, right? And now let's move a little bit to those examples. And I'll start just quickly with reminding that usually how it starts or started for people, you mentioned a few different games. A lot of people start with Ludo. So that's man, do not irritate yourself, right? That's a very common game, especially playing initially with younger kids. It's fairly easy to play. A lot of people play Monopoly as one of their family games fairly early, right? Of course, later on, there are more advanced games, and sometimes you already start with any other of the games. And when it comes to the computer or video games, actually, the kids nowadays usually start with any type of mobile games. And those are very different depending on the school or the district they're in and whatever the kids are playing in the region at that time. But for the video games, I do have a fun fact for you. So what do you think? What is the most sold in the terms of numbers, right? In the terms of numbers, what is the most sold game in the world currently? When you're thinking about those, right? So what the game that was sold in the most numbers, right? Any concepts? You can write in the chat. I'm looking at the chat right now. If you have any concept. So the game that has, and I'll give you the number. So 520 million copies sold, right? So far, all right? All right, so I do see some propositions. There's mobile and there's Tetris. Yeah, and Irina is actually right, so I'll go with that. It's Tetris. There's some series on Netflix and one of the other shows right now on the Tetris as well. So apparently, Tetris was sold in 520 million copies, and some of the other games, the new games, and of course they reach those numbers much faster because they are used nowadays and played nowadays, but there are around 320 million of sold copies. That's considered very, very, very good number. So just a fun fact. All right. So with that, I was thinking about, okay, what's the definition of the game, right? Because we're talking about the crisis situation, but what can we learn from the games as such? So the definition of the game, right? And I found interesting definition from Mark Rosewater. He is a was head designer of Magic the Gathering. So that's the most played card game in the world. A game is a thing with a goal or goals, restrictions, agency, and the lack of real world relevance. And I was thinking, how come? Is it true? Because I'm talking about the real life examples and applications of those, right? And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that, okay, this is a metaphor there, right? Because we actually do have those examples. And just shouting out on the recent pandemic that we had, right? There are some games, and they were there before the pandemic came, right? On thinking about playing pandemic. So that is cooperative game. If you don't know it, it's a cooperative game where all of you need to beat the pandemic, right? So it starts spreading, or number of diseases start spreading, and there are a few of you, and you have different roles, and you need to work together and use the data and find the cures for all of those diseases before they spread too wide, right? So you do have example of that. And on the other side, if you want to understand the mechanics of how the plague or how the pandemic works, right? There is a game that goes from the other angle. It's called Plague Incorporated. And you become a disease in that game. And what you actually want to do, you want to spread across the world, right? And again, you need to think how to do it, right? Wisely, because there are other people that want to stop you, right? There are some scientists, there are some blockades of the transmission, and so on and so forth, right? So only with those examples, right, there are already some things that we can learn from the board games in this, purely in the example of the pandemic, right? So, of course, there's collaboration. Of course, there are some other things, but also the data and the approach, how those diseases spread, how those things work, how can we address those things, right? So giving this understanding may help us later on make a little bit better choices or be a little bit more prepared for some of the things there. Okay. So question to you before I go to a few other of my examples. I do have 7 more, I think. So any games you know that can teach us how to be a little bit more ready for the crisis situations, right? And of course, you just shoot the name of the games here, right? But we can later on see whether we overlapped with those and do we have the same concepts, right? So when you're thinking what's needed for addressing the crisis situation, be it big crisis or smaller crisis, what would be the games that help? World of Warcraft, WoW. All right, okay, good example. This is a real-time strategy. Am I making it right? Yeah, I think real-life strategy where you are building your base and you're expanding and you need to adapt to different scenarios and situations. Fallout, a survival game, right? Where it's a post-apocalyptic world and you need to survive and adapt accordingly. Monopoly, that's a crisis situation in every family the moment the kids stop winning, right? That's definitely the thing, right? Duna, so I'm guessing it's Dune, but maybe it's something else. So Dune is a good example. You do have conflict there, you do have worker placement there, and so on. StarCraft, real-time strategy again, as well. Warcraft, okay, few. Any other examples? Okay, so if there will be any other ideas to put them here. Jenga, oh, I don't know this one. I'm guessing it's similar to Jenga, but that may be something completely different. The Last of Us, yeah, definitely survival game. Civilization, planning, strategizing, long-term thinking, how things ago, but then adapting to the other players as well. Standard deep survival. All right, good example. Thanks for sharing though. You can put still them there. I'll be moving forward here though. So what are those experiences that we can learn? And just some of those. And of course, there are a number of other things. From each of the games, you can find hundreds of different applications. I've chosen a few of those for each of those, and I will be mixing a board game, a video game, a sports games, and so on. I do have 7 or 8 of those here, right? So the first, as a warm-up here, is Dixit. Dixit, you may know this game. This is a cards game, right? So within this card game, what you do, every player gets 6 or 7 cards, and they do have those different pictures or images, as you can see here, right? So all those different images. And now within those, there are some smaller details and big views and so on and so forth. And what happens? The first players finds a card and thinks about what comes to my mind when I look at this card. And maybe it's a word freedom, for example. So I choose one of those cards and I say freedom. I put it heads down, right? And then everyone else chooses one of their cards that fit into the word freedom, right? Put them down. We toss the cards, right? And we put them up and we look at those. And now everyone needs to guess which card is mine. So which card best fitted into the freedom word from all those cards that you can see here, for example. As you can imagine, sometimes it's fairly easy, sometimes it's quite hard, right? So what I take from this game is that perspective is key. Now, within those pictures, when you look at those, you will see that while there is one overall picture, usually there are 3 or 4 different concepts behind each of those, that at least a few different concepts that you can find there, right? So perspective is key. And then being able to zoom in your real life and then zoom out and see the situation, the wider situation, especially when something changes, when something stressful is happening, when the crisis situation hits, right? Being able not only to be here and now and focus very deeply on this particular problem, but also being able to zoom out and look at the wider picture, it helps a lot in setting up the scene and making the right calls and the decisions within your activities. And the second part is that while you should be observant around the surroundings, so this zoom in, zoom out, what's totally on the card, so what's happening around you, right? It's also looking at the people, because the people, when you play with them in the games, of course, they make some faces, they do have their different tics, they do behave differently depending on how they play. So understanding how they play may help you make the better choice. And that's the same in real life, right? Understanding how the people in your environment work and how they adapt to the situations is something that can be very helpful. So that goes with the Dixit game. Now, the second example is from the video games, and that's fairly new considering, of course, right? Game Fortnite. So Fortnite is a game, you may have played, but if you have kids, your kids almost definitely played Fortnite. So Fortnite is a game where it's a battle royale game. So what that means, either you by yourself or your team are dropped on the island and you need to basically become the only one standing, right? Be the last standing as a person or as a group, depending whether you play a group or not. We can agree whether kids should be playing this kind of games or not. We could discuss that, but assuming some people play that, right? Now, there are a number of things that you need from this kind of games. This is not the only type of games, right? With the real-time strategies, you need the same. With the shooters, you need the same things, right? And there are some of the elements that are really being developed there, right? So we need to make fast decisions, depending how the situation is changing, what's happening, what you see on the map and what you see around you, what are the things there. You need to make fast decisions there and be able to make fast decisions. And you very quickly see whether those were the good decisions or bad decisions. So you have a very quick learning cycle within that, right? You need to look at the critical thinking. And if you're playing the group game, right, then you should be looking at the effective communication, right? Are we communicating? Are we aligning ourselves on the goal? How we will address the things? Are we strategizing together? How will we survive? How will we make it forward? How will we work together, right? So So those are the things, even though the game seems, as you know, you just go and fight on the island, basically, right? Those are the things that I believe in these types of games we can be learning, and they help us a lot later on. Now, number of you did put Warcraft or World of Warcraft there. Now there are two games under that, right? So one is that you go in the multiple player RPG game that you go and solve some quests and so on and so forth. So you need to adapt and make decisions and so on and so forth. And the second one is RTS, right? Real-time strategy, where you build your base and you need to conquer some areas. And again, depending what others do, you need to adapt to that as well. All right. So that's the second one. The third one, you may know this. This is a board game again. This is Catan, or Settlers of Catan. Now, very briefly on how that works for those that do not know. So within this game, what you do is you put a random setup of those tiles that you see, and they are your map. And now you as a player, you choose your starting position. And now, depending whether you're the first, second, or third person, right, it will be a different type of place. And what happens in the game is what you will be throwing. You will be throwing dice. So 2 dice that you will be throwing, and you see those numbers, right? 3, 4, 6, 5, 8, 5. So each tile has their own number. Now, for that number to work, you need to throw 2 dice. Right? And whenever this number is shown as a sum of 2 dice, so let's say 4 and 4, it gets 8, right? Or 6 and 2, it gets 8, right? So this tile gets activated. And then whenever the tile is activated, whoever has some constructions near this tile, so in this scenario, that would be this blue one, would get some resources. So in the scenario wheat, because this is the tile resource for wheat, right? Or it could be ore, if that would be this, or some grass or something, I don't remember what there is, or some stones here, right? And then you use these resources to build further your village, right? Or your villages or cities and so on, and to build them further, right? Now, what's really important to some extent are 2 things. So one, this is a random game to some extent, because when you throw dice, you never know what will come, right? You throw 2 dice, it can be any number between 2 and 12, right? So that's one thing. And then second, it still matters where you start, because it can help you a bit. And now, why is that, right? It's there because even though it's a random game, if you have a lot of throws, or if you do have those 2 dice, there are some numbers that are a little bit more probable than others, right? So the probability comes here, right? And when you think about those games, then 6, 7, and 8 are the numbers that are most probable to fall, right? Because the most combinations of, 1 and 6 gives 7, right? 2 and 5, 7, 3 and 4, 7, and so on. So a lot of those different elements go into 7, right? So 7, because of that, 7 is taken for something else in this game, but then we do have 6 and 8, right? So as the next numbers there. So what happens is you want to be close to those numbers. You want to be close to this 8. So if you start, and what you will do, you will start your game by putting your castle somewhere here, right? Between this 3, 4, and 9, of course you can be lucky and you can get those numbers, and they can come more than any others, right? Because only in the bigger numbers game that will flat out, right? But purely from the probability perspective, the 8 or 6 for you are the better choices, are the best choices. They are even marked here in the different colors when you see it. Right? And then that goes there. Now, the other part in the game, you can negotiate and you can trade with some resources with other players, but that's a different thing. Right? So what I wanted for us to take from this game is that there are 2 things, right? One, there are things within your control. So even within the randomness of the game, there are things within your control, right, where you can choose where you start or where you aim to go and build your city towards to increase your chances, right? And that's the second part, right? When you're planning, when you're thinking what to do, how to adapt or how to work, right? Think about increasing your chances, right? That may not work at all. As we all know, dice are very tricky. You can always get 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, right? And no planning, no probabilistics will work here, right? But just to increase your chances, you should cover the wider ground, and then you should be closer to those numbers if you have a choice, of course, right? And again, in real life, those are the things that you would be looking at as well for, right? For Thomas was speaking about the resilience, right? And making sure that you are able to adapt yourself to the situations or pick up yourself and so on, right? So focusing on things within your control are the things that help with that a lot, right? And the second part is planning for the increasing your chances. That works everywhere, regardless of the business type of activities you do, planning for those increasing chances. All right, so now I go to the next one. So this started as the video game and then was also adapted as a board game as well. And the topic is tough because it's about the war, and it's called This War of Mine. And this is a game where you as a player or you as a players, you become citizens of the city that is besieged. So there is a siege of the city, and you live in the city where the aggressor's army is outside of your city, right? And they want to take control of it, and it's very dangerous, very hard to adapt and so on. And this is a game where you will be asked to make a lot of tough choices. You will go and you will decide, okay, do I take the food from someone? Do I give someone food, or we share it, or we do something like that, right? And those are tough things because, you know, you have limited resources and so on. Or maybe you help someone or do not help someone, or maybe you hide somewhere or sneak in some covenants, or you just hide in plain sight. So different choices, so to speak, right? But what we can take from this game and actually keep in mind when we are struggling in the real life is that actions have consequences, and those consequences can come in a long period of time, right? And that goes to a number of different spiritual approaches as well, where you think karma coming back, right? Either now or later on, or with people believing that the luck comes back or the universe comes back. There are different things. Of course, not all the consequences, even if you did something that you assumed is good in the game, will actually bring the good result, because there are some challenges in the life there as well, right? And some of the things this game focuses on as well, that I think is very important to remember and build your resilience around, that is psychological safety and empathy, right? Whenever there is a crisis situation, a lot of people will be stressed. A lot of people will not know what to do. Their behavior may change completely from what you know, because they're in a completely different setup, in a completely different scenario, right? So being able to understand how the psychology works, right? And being able to help them adapt and build the psychological safety within the bubble that you have access to and you have control of, right? Will go a long mile in helping others going through this tough time. And that goes with empathy. And by the way, empathy goes a long way anywhere in any scenario you go through. So that's the other game that I'm leaving with you. Now I jump to the software topic again. So the board game, Ticket to Ride. And Ticket to Ride, in this game, you build your own train duct, right? So you want to build a train road from one station to another, and it's a random allocation of those stations. So for example, from Sevastopol to Budapest, right here. Right, and you have few of those missions. The other players have some of those missions as well. You do have some cards of different colors that give you opportunity to build those tracks. So whenever I would have 4 yellow cards, I could do my track here, for example, right? Gray is any number, any color, and so on, right? And now, but those tracks are very long. So usually one is from here to here, for example, and the second is from here to here, but also we have 2 or 3 shorter ones. So as you can imagine, depending which type of path you take, right, you will need to adapt this to the to what others are doing. Are they blocking your path or not? Because if I take this path, right, nobody else will be able to take it. But if I take this path, yellow one, the violet one still can move forward here. So adapting to the situation, whether when you want to build, how you want to build, is important. So within the game, I mentioned those cards, right? One of your moves is taking the cards, right? Second move is playing cards, the number that you need to build the path for yourself, right? And third is mixing something there, right? So you either get a lot of those cards and prepare for number of those tracks there to go at once, so one by one by one by one, or you get some and immediately that you're ready, you build something so that nobody else stops you, right? There are different strategies, right? And now my take and my strategy is usually I want to keep my options open for as long as possible. So I am the hoarder here, right? So I gather information, I gather resources, right? And I want to have my options open for as long as possible. But having said that, I need to plan. I need to have few plans ready, because if someone takes my main path, I need to know, okay, what will I do? How will I go around it? Is it still possible? Will I adapt to that or not? So ideally, I want to have few plans, what I do, what if scenarios. And then the thing that I like, and I like it in business, I like it in the games in real life as well. So thinking about it in a way, how long till the risk exposure changes, right? So as long as there is nothing here, my risk exposure is probably very low. But the moment I see someone building the route here, right, and ending it here, and if this is my only way, I should be building here right away, because my risk just went up, because most likely if they went here, they have only few more roads to go to. One of those is here. But if they're building somewhere there, right, then maybe it doesn't make sense to build here. I should be looking at some other place, right? So looking at the risk exposure that changes over time is very interesting approach of thinking when to do something. And in the crisis scenarios and situations, it sounds to me the same, right? When we do this zoom in, zoom out, we see the bigger picture, right? We want to understand where should we act. And sometimes it's immediate. You need to act right away. You need to bias for action. But sometimes you need to understand what are the options, what are the scenarios, what is happening, and then decide on those what if scenarios and make sure that you approach it at the right moment. Now, one story that I heard on the seminar with one of the Polish travelers, Tomek Michalski. So he was he's traveling a lot, and what he was saying is that one of the things that he's done with his families, and that was very inspiring for me, was that whenever he's going on the travel, he has few plans. If something goes wrong, right? If something goes wrong, for example, with the car, we'll take the train. If something goes bad with this, we do this, that, and that, right? So for the trips, he's very ready. But what he did as well, he set planning scenarios with his family. Okay, dear family, if something happens, right? If there is a bad experience happening in our city or in our country, what will we do? And of course, we can assume we will be all together, we'll be at house, we will pack right away to the car and go away. But if that's not the case, if you are on the delegation and you are visiting other city, do you have agreement on what you will do? Will you meet at your grandparents' place? Will you go to another city? Will you do something or something? So thinking about those A, B, C plans and having few of those ready, so that and talked through, so that hopefully you will never use them, but just having them ready is super useful in having this psychological safety that we mentioned before as well. And moving further, this is next game called Sagrada. And within Sagrada, it's a dice game. You throw the dice, you get some color and some number, right? And then you need to put them in a specific order on the board, right? And you have some missions. For example, in the columns, all of the dice should be of different color or of different number, and so on, right? And what I found out from this game It's a very simple game. You throw the dice, you try to put 2 dice at the time, right? But that you still need to prioritize which dice to take first, because other players may take your dice, right? And second, you will not always be able to get all the goals together and make all the things work out. So if that's the case, then you need to triage, so to speak, make sure what's more important, what's less important, what brings most value, and then maximize the game for the long term for yourself, right? And with that, you limit number of choices, so what you focus on and where you go. And that goes, again, hopefully fairly explanatory for the crisis situations and the planning. And I think I've got 2 more. So this one is actually the one I mentioned to you. So if you want to play for a long strategic game, this is Twilight Empire. This is when you know how to play it and you know all the rules and everyone knows how to play, it's probably 8 hours of play. If you don't know, it's probably 10 to 12. So within that game, you are the Galactic Empire as the other players as well, and you build your economy, you get some new systems, and you have some diplomacy, trading, commerce, and so on and so forth, right? And what happens a lot in this game is that people go on the warfare, so they do want to conquer a lot of areas, and it's very hard in this game, by the way, right? But what they forget about is that they do have the missions that they got at the beginning of the game, and those very rarely are connected to conquest. Those are some diplomatic or some warfare, but not that much, or getting some number of money in the banks of commerce and so on. So those missions are there, but people see that they do have some starships, so they want to conquest the areas. So what helps a lot is defining how the success looks like. Right? What is actually the success? How do I win? And that's really often understanding that in the crisis scenario, okay, what do we need to do to survive or to win or to help, right? How does the success look like? That may be something different that you thought at the beginning, right? And then if you know what that is, you should measure it. Are we progressing? Is it going well? Is it moving forward, right? And what helps a lot is in this game, different races have different superpowers. Right, so strength and weaknesses, right? And that's the same with your team or with yourself, right? You should know what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. You should map your team for the crisis management, right? And use the strength, right, while addressing the weaknesses with the strength of someone else. Right? Those are some things that we can use in the crisis management. Okay, and the last one, I wanted to use one from the sports, right? So team sports games here as well. So I did put soccer here or European football, but actually any team sport games here. And I was going through some of the interviews with the players, right? And actually be it individual or team sports games, right? And all of them were saying basically the same thing, right? Training, preparation, right? To get very good at something, you need to practice, right? You start not knowing how to do those things and how to do, and you become better and better. And the more expertise you have, the more scenarios you considered, right? The better you will be. And there are those numbers, right? 10,000 hours to learn anything new on the expert level, right? The beats in sports or anything else, right? But here as the examples, right? The penalty shots, right? This is a stressful situation for the player. Usually the game depends on this, right? So having a lot of practice, right? But also having the mental strength of knowing that I'm able to work with that is something that helps a lot. And the second example would be the red card, right? So what you'll see coaches doing is that the teams will know how they will play if for whatever reason they would need to play without someone in the game, right? They need to practice this situation as well, because that's a crisis situation for the team within the soccer game, at least, right? If for some reason someone gets red card, right, the dynamics change. There's one less of you. You need to have a different defense, different attack. You need to adapt accordingly, right? And again, if you practiced before, right, or if you talked at least or thought about those plans, the team will know how to work with that, and then the scenario will be a little bit easier to adapt in real life, right? So with that, practicing, experiencing, talking about it, or adapting with teams is something very, very useful. All right. So one more thing on the board games. This is I found a very actually I go here right. I found a very interesting survey, and it's anonymous, of course, but it's interesting for one concept that I have here, right? So when you think about you playing board games, right, or computer games, or sports games, or any other games, right, excluding as a child, you ignore time as a child. Think, did you ever cheat in a game? Did you ever, bend the rules for your benefit? How did it work? Never, a few times. And again, any answer is okay here, right? It depends on who you play with, how you play. Some games are built on cheating, actually, right? Number of them are not, right? But let's give ourselves a second here, how that works out and builds. Right, we do have never, and then a few times, few people, many. Once is hard to pinpoint, right? And that. Okay, so we do have some setup here. Now you can vote there as well. But I found a very interesting poll that was done with 1,700 people, so not that much, but quite a lot. And the results were quite interesting for me, right? Because excluding as a child, have you ever cheated in the game? Almost 60 people said never, right? Some people said once, 30 people said few times, and only roughly 5% of people said many times more, right? And this is my thought on that whenever we're doing something or there's something happening there, we should assume good intentions, right? Of course, to be able to assume good intentions, we need to set clear rules, right, within the games. What are the rules, how we work, what behaviors are acceptable, not acceptable, and so on. And that helps a lot, right? Why that is important? Because if you do have a clear reference point and you contract yourself being in the games, in the business, in somewhere else, it may be easier in the crisis situation to fall back on the known agreements that you have, right? And then whenever the safety comes again, and psychological safety, it will be easier for people to adapt and work accordingly. But then again, my take here as well is that majority of the people want to help you and assume good intentions there. Right, so summing up, we do have a few minutes, a very short summary. Zoom in, zoom out, remember what the perspective in the crisis situations. Remember to find the second to look from the bigger picture, what's happening, where we're going, right? Think about how long till the risk exposure changes, because sometimes you need to act very fast, but sometimes you can wait and adapt to the situation accordingly, right? Plan for the long term and for different scenarios. Have those ABC scenarios ideally tested or thought before, so that you don't need to make split-second decisions right away when the crisis situation happens, right? Define how the success looks like where do you want to go, how do you want to sort those things out, right? Know who you are working for. You remember the Dixit and the cards, right? But any other game and any other scenario, actually, if you know who you work with, you can help them act accordingly, right? Take care of psychological safety and then assume good intentions. So with that, thank you so much. Hopefully all the dice and all the games will work with you. And then hopefully you will never need to use it in the crisis situations. But if you do, maybe some experiences from the games will help you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Przemek. And I'm going to share my screen to show this QR code for the Slido. And we already have a couple of questions in the Slido. So first, do you think starting to play video games as an adult is beneficial for developing necessary soft skills, or is it better to have started playing as a kid?
Well, so probably the earlier you start, the easier it is, right? But when it comes to, there's never too late to start, right? And actually practicing anything, including playing games. Now, of course, depending what types of games you will be playing, you may or may not be building your soft skills or some of the skills behind there. My take is that balance those things. And if I were to choose, I would be choosing board games over the video games if you have opportunity, because you do have a social interaction right away. You right away can see how others behave, how you do that. And it's a fun time to spend time together.
Thank you. Next question, how to find a good game?
well, recommendations, most likely. I would say I would start with, if you've never played any game, right? I would start with thinking what type of games would be, could be nice for me. So what type of things do I like to do? Can I focus for 6 hours, right, to play some game, right? Or maybe I need very interactive, quick games, right? Maybe I like puzzles and I want to solve something and so on. So within that, you will get some categories that you can later on do a search filter for that. What I would recommend is that for majority, well, in number of bigger cities probably, right? But you can have a test run with some of the games. There are some shops selling board games that most likely will allow you to come and play some of the games there to check whether that's happening or not. Or you can go and play with the friends, right? Well, I don't like reading the instructions, right? So yeah, with that, hopefully someone else already read it and can explain the game to me. So if that's the case, I can find the friends that do have this game, can explain it to me, we can play, and then I can check whether I like it or not, and only then actually buy it. But then there are a number of boards with classification of the best strategy game, the best something game, the best something game, and they're fairly accurate, I would say.
Great, thank you. One more. There is a myth that playing video games leads to addiction, especially in Asia. What is your take on this?
Well, so can it happen? Yes. It can happen with, so my take is it can happen with anything that you do, if you do too much or do not adapt accordingly to the scenario and situation, right? So with that, can addiction to the games happen? Yes, as to anything else. But my take is that for majority of the people, right, you need to plan your day accordingly, adapt and so on. If you play a little bit here or there and you do it with friends especially, this is just nice way of spending time and sometimes developing yourself. So can it lead to addiction? Yes. Does the research, research that I saw says that playing games, right, in the reasonable time of playing, right, is actually good for you, right? So that it helps you develop all those different cognitive skills that you can have, right? But doing it too much can lead to addiction, as with anything else that you do too much.
Thank you. And one last question, and we have 3 minutes to the next speaker. How to manage with procrastination from playing game?
I'm not sure I get the question. So my understanding here is that you're asking about, for example, within the turn games, so playing for turns in the strategy game, you say, oh, just one more turn, and I play and play and click and click and click, right? Well, so that goes down to your discipline, right? And then say either planning for yourself, saying, okay, I play by this amount of time or by this specific event that cannot happen longer than within that. And then if you do, and then you finish basically then, right? If that was the question, I would say discipline, but at the same time, I totally do get it. And sometimes it happened for me that I ended up playing till 5 a.m. in the morning because I just wanted to finish something. That happens sometimes. And my take again is, as long as you can live with that, and it happens rarely, that's acceptable.
Thank you so much. I think we're good. No more questions. Thank you, Przemek.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.